What's up everybody, it's Ficton here with another Outriders guide. Today we're going to be going over a build guide for a starter Trickster. Should easily be able to get you guys up to challenge tier 10 and beyond without any legendaries or rare mods needed. This is actually the build that I have been playing since the start of the game and I have been enjoying it thoroughly. Personally, I think the playstyle is also super fun, this being a shotgun build. You're just going to go around one-shotting most all mobs, and for elites it's only 2 to 3 shots typically, so not too bad either. You can see some of the highest damage numbers you have seen so far, which is also a nice little fun playstyle perk. But not only does this build dish out great damage, we're also focusing on being very tanky too. Again, this being a starter build, I think it's important to balance our damage and survivability since we don't have great gear yet, or the legendaries or the rare mods. I'd also say this build is probably going to be excelling the most at clear speed. It has really high clear speed up to bosses, but then compared to other builds, it does lack a bit of boss damage unless you have it set up fully, which honestly though isn't too big of a deal because getting the right mods we need isn't too bad since they're all tier 1 and tier 2 mods that we're going to be using. Once you have it all set up, you're going to be clearing expeditions in gold tier times, no problem. With all that being said, if you end up enjoying this guide, do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. Also, if you want to support the channel, check the link to my Patreon in the video description below. I also do stream on Twitch, so if you ever want to stop by and ask questions or just come hang out, feel free to follow my Twitch, which again is linked below. Yeah, back to the build guide. Let's go ahead and hop in and get going. Alright, here we are in game. Let's go ahead and hop on over to our skills, which we're going to talk about first. And after that, we're going to go over our class skill tree, and then lastly, our gear with all of our mods that we have chosen for this build. So first and foremost is, of course, Borrow Time, which is going to be our defensive skill. It's going to first give you a pretty hefty shield, actually, and it's going to mark your location for 28 seconds. And if you ever get into a bind where you're taking a whole bunch of damage, click it again, and it's going to teleport you back to where you initially put it. Now the thing about this skill, actually, we don't want to do that because we want it to be up as much as possible, because we're going to talk about it in our mods, but we're actually using this skill to give us a whole bunch of armor and extra resistances. So as long as this skill is active, you get a ton of defensive stats on you. So moving on to our second skill is going to be Venter's Knife. We're actually not going to put any mods on this one per se, but we are going to be using it constantly. You should never have this on cooldown. It's going to do two things. It's going to put that knife mark above them, and it's going to give them double damage on the first shot that you shoot at them. So because we're using a shotgun specifically with this build, it's going to have a really high base damage. So that first shot, when they have that mark above their head, is going to do double damage, which is so much because that's such high base damage. So it's very, very good. It's also, of course, going to put that mark above their head, which is going to make them in stasis, which is going to raise them up into the air. So of course they're just not shooting you at that point. It's going to make them a little bit easier to hit critical shots as well. So pretty good overall. Again, you never want this on cooldown. Throw it out as much as possible. And lastly, here is our bread and butter, which is Twisted Rounds. I'm sure you guys are getting used to this with some other builds. I know that there are the Blighted Rounds for the Technomancer, and I think they're called the Ashen Rounds for the Pyromancer. They do a whole bunch of the same stuff. It's very, very strong. Now, with this build specifically, it's giving you firepower equal to 11,000 for mine, 600, and it's going to last until you reload or switch weapons. So typically what I've seen people do with this is they use like LMGs or things with higher clip counts, because you never want the magazine to go to 0 because then the skill ends, right? Now it's not as big of a deal when we use shotguns, which is why I think the pump action shotgun is actually the best, which we'll talk about here shortly, but it's because it has that super high base damage that you're able to one-shot mobs all the time. And if you're not one-shotting, you're two-shotting mobs. So you're actually being able to refill your ammo constantly, which again we'll talk about in the mod section here shortly. But very, very strong skill. This skill and the Borrow Time as my defensive skill, those two have definitely carried me to the higher tiers just with the skills themselves, not even having the best gear. Just putting these on and having the right mods is very, very powerful. Let's go ahead and move on over to our class skill tree. We are of course going with the Assassin, which is more focused on firepower for your build, whereas Harbinger is more defensive like a tank, and Reaver is more focused on anomaly power, which is like your skills. Let's go ahead and briefly kind of talk about all these. So we are going to be wanting to get as much close range damage as possible, again since we're a shotgun build. Then we're going to move up to decrease reload time, because With our shotguns, we have low mag counts, right? Even though we're replenishing our ammo quite frequently, there will be occasions where you do have to reload. And because you have that low mag count, you do want to reload as fast as possible so you can get shooting again. Because if you're not, you're kind of a sitting duck in this game. So that's actually very important to get that reload time. We're going to move up here, and then we're going to go up here to increase shotgun damage. This is going to be one of your first skills that you pick up as you're leveling up. Very strong. We're actually going to get these 3 last, so don't get those yet. We're going to move over and decrease the cooldown of your movement skills, which is going to be your borrowed time. It's going to be your shield. Then we're going to come up here and get activation of deception skills, increases your weapon damage, which is what we're trying to buff as much as possible by 50% for 8 seconds. And that's going to be triggered by your Venter's Knife. Again, you never want that on cooldown. You want to throw out that knife as much as possible. We did pick up some more close range damage to get up there, and then we're going to get some more cooldown reduction for your Venter's Knife. We're going to go down here. When attacking enemies from behind, all your weapon damage is increased by 20%. So pretty strong if you're attacking from behind. I always try and kind of position myself to where I'm behind the monsters, the enemies, and I'm getting extra 20% there. And then we're going to get this right here. So when your damaging skill ends, you have weapon damage for 50% for 8 seconds. And we're actually going to be, you might kind of think this is a little counterintuitive, but we're doing it for a specific reason here. And that's going to be triggered off of your twisted rounds. So again, we want our twisted rounds up as much as possible. So technically this won't be up that much, but that's okay, because if it does go away and you do lose your twisted rounds and you're onto regular ammo, you still want to be able to do a good amount of damage until it comes off cooldown and you can use it again. So this is kind of a buffer there to help you still do a good amount of damage. So we're going to move over to get some, actually mess this up. Do not get this node. You actually want this node here, because again, we want as much close range weapons damage as possible. So just make sure you get this node instead of this node. Death probability, just some extra weapon damage here, and we're going to go down here to get this one, which is a whole bunch of extra damage for elites and bosses. So very strong right there. Then we're going to get this. So this is actually pretty strong. Increase your magazine size by 50% because we have shotguns. They have really low magazine capacity in the first place. So getting 50% extra is huge. So very big node here. And then of course we just want some extra shotgun damage. And then we're going to get this, which is for each enemy in close range, which you should always be in close range, your weapon damage is increased by 8%. So it's actually going to be quite a bit of damage. And then your last 3 points, we're going to be going to get increase extra close range weapon damage. And then Leap of Quietus, I don't know how to say that. Activating movement skills increases your armor piercing by 25% for 10 seconds. This is actually not going to be up too much because it is our shield ability. And like I said, we don't want to be triggering our shield as much as possible. We want it just kind of, you press it once and it's going for 30 seconds. And you don't press it again. So basically, and then it goes on cooldown after that for a good 11 seconds. So once every, 39 seconds, you're going to be getting an extra 25% armor pen for 10 seconds, so it's not too bad. But basically, it is pretty good. You know, when you start a fight with a boss and it resets all of your abilities, go ahead and press it, and it's going to give you a little bit extra damage. So not too bad. And then after that, we do get an extra 10% HP for each enemy that died in close range recently. So not too bad there. Perfect. So let's move on over to our inventory. Now, of course, we've been talking about this the whole time. It is the shotgun, and I do think pump action shotguns are the best, and that's because they're going to have the best base damage for shotguns. You can get a little example here. This is even a legendary, but that doesn't matter too much, but it's an automatic shotgun, and the base damage here is 4,300. Compared to a pump action shotgun, it's 13.5 thousand. And again, we want as much upfront loaded damage as possible for when we do that Venter's Knife on them, and then we're behind them, you know, and we're doing that one shot, and it's just like super high damage. So we want as much base damage as possible. So the pump action is definitely the way to go. And then you want the standard version. You do not want the breach version, you want the standard version. Perfect. And for the mods on this weapon, we do want to go with Perpetual Mobile. This is the absolute best mod for any build out there that is using the toggleable rounds ability, because we do not want those to be, we don't want to ever lose those super beefed up rounds, right? And for that, we don't want our magazine to get to 0. Now with this ability, Anytime it goes below 35%, you have less than 35% ammo and you get a kill, it's going to refresh all of your ammo back up to full. Now, most people use this on light machine gun builds or even assault rifle builds that have high magazine capacity, but again, it's okay for us because we do so much high damage that even with one shot, we're going to kill most monsters. So getting that extra 35% ammo after that, or once you're down below 35 and getting those kills, is actually not too bad when you have a pump action shotgun. And it's a pretty fun playstyle, getting those really high damage numbers. And then you're reloading constantly because you're killing, those smaller monsters. But that does kind of bring me to my second topic here, is your second weapon. You definitely want a second weapon that is more of a support weapon that can be used if you ever do run out of your rounds and you're kind of like a sit and duck when you have to reload or wait for your ability. Getting a weapon that has a little bit more range and maybe some mods on there that have like, survivability or sustainability with like life leech and stuff like that is pretty good. I have one on here that helps me freeze enemies when I get crits. So that's also pretty good. So I can, use this weapon until my main ability comes off cooldown and I can go back to my shotgun and start doing some more insane damage. So very good there. And also on my second mod here, I think this is probably the best tier 2 mod. I don't have a lot of the legendary mods yet, but as far as tier 2, I do think this is probably the best. It's called Bone Shrapnel, and basically anytime you get a kill, it's going to do a 55,000 AoE damage around that kill, so within 5 meters, and it's on a 1 second cooldown. So basically anytime you kill anything, it's going to do a huge AoE damage ability, and it's going to kill like all the monsters around it too. So very, very strong. There's a couple different options, but I do think these two specifically are the best for this. If you do want to go with something a little bit different, and maybe you have a little bit more mods at your disposal, you could do the tier 2 mod that critical strikes do not consume ammo. And then if you have the legendary mod that freezes on critical strike, that is a super strong combo as well, because if you freeze, they're going to sit in place and not move, so you can get easy critical strikes. And then you just keep going, you keep shooting, and you don't consume ammo, and you can just constantly shoot them. That's mainly better for, I would say, like an automatic shotgun instead of the pump action shotgun, but it is an interesting combo that you could try out doing that. I do think on the pump action, this is probably the best setup that I have seen so far with the mods that at least are at my disposal. So moving on to our helmet here. Now we're going to mainly talk about the tier 1 mods, because since this is a kind of more starter build, not everybody is going to have, like legendary mods or anything like that, and I don't even have a lot of the legendary mods myself. So we're definitely going to talk about the tier 1 mods, and I will briefly talk about a few of the really good tier 2 mods that I have selected as well. And I guess also one thing that I did forget to mention, let's see if I have one here. Some of the stats that we want on our gear is going to look something like this one here. So bonus firepower and close range damage. Those are the best two for us. And then maybe something like life leech or probably even max HP would be the top 3 that I would go with. Bonus firepower, close range damage, and max HP. Those are the best. I think there might be a bonus armor. If there is a bonus armor, that might be the better one instead of HP, but either one of those are probably just fine. Perfect. So going back up to our helmet here, again, we want to buff our twisted rounds as much as possible with all these mods. So this one is going to be receive 30% critical strike damage while twisted rounds is active. Very strong. And actually this tier 2 mod is super strong as well if you're able to get this. Killing shots increase your firepower, and it stacks up to 3 times. So that's just a whole bunch of firepower. And again, we want to stack as much base damage on our weapons as possible, so stacking firepower is very strong. So that's actually a pretty good tier 2 mod. Going on to our chest piece here, again we have buffing our twisted rounds, and we're buffing it with additional firepower, 15% increased additional firepower. Now this tier 2 mod that I actually have on here is very good. So it increases your armor by 23,000 and resistance by 10%. Fantastic for defenses. So if you are able to get that as a tier 2 mod, I would try to get that somewhere on your gear. And again, I have that bonus firepower on there. Long range damage does nothing for you guys, so try and avoid that if you are able to. Moving on to our legs here, we do have some, that's where I had that bonus firepower and close range damage, so that's 2 perfect mods. And then with that additional mag, this is actually very important since we are a shotgun build over, say, like a light machine gun or an assault rifle build. You probably wouldn't need this, but we are going to go ahead and pick this up since we are shotgun build and we have less mag count. There will be times where you run out of ammo and you lose twisted rounds. So having that extra, the second mag is going to kind of eliminate that a little bit. So you're going to be able to pump out more damage since you have that second mag with twisted rounds. Now, this second mod here that I have, Rejuvenation, is actually pretty solid as well. You guys are able to pick that up. You can kind of see a trend here. Firepower and armor. Firepower and armor. We're getting, damage and defense. So you receive some additional firepower and additional armor whenever your health is replenished, which is basically all the time. So pretty good little boots here that I have. Moving on to our gloves. So our gloves and our boots are going to be our defensive mods. So for this one, I have Borrowed Time. So it receives additional armor and 30% resistances when this skill is active, which is a huge amount of additional armor and additional resistances. And that's going to be up for a solid 30 seconds. So you're going to have this quite often. Now that tier 2 mod is pretty poop for me. I don't have almost any resistance piercing on this build, so I would probably switch that out, but I wanted that Borrowed Time on these gloves most importantly, so I did that. Not the best tier 2 mod there, but that tier 1 mod for Borrowed Time is absolutely huge for your defenses, so definitely try and get that on your gear if you can. And that goes perfectly with this next one here. So Borrowed Time, activating the skill increases your armor by 100% for 10 seconds. So really, really strong. So right when you activate this, again, it's not going to be up too long, but especially like in the beginning of boss fights, it is going to be up, and that's going to be very strong for your armor. So let's actually do a test here, and I'll show you guys how much armor. Actually, let's go back. So we have a base armor of 50k. So let's use the ability here, right? There we go. 232k. We went from 50k to 232k for the first 10 seconds. That is a ton of armor. You can see right there, physical damage reduction 85%. So we're going to let this drop off here after that 10 seconds is up. See if we have to go out of the screen and come back maybe. And so after that 10 seconds, it drops down to 116 for 80% physical damage reduction. So pretty solid. We went from 50k to almost 120,000, and that's any time that this skill is up. So you can see that it actually just went away right there. It's up for about 30 seconds. So very, very strong defenses between those two. I would absolutely try and focus on getting those two as far as tier 1s as soon as possible. Then maybe the most important one after that is getting this skill effect, the 2 magazines before triggering the cooldown. I would probably say those are the top 3 that you really, really want for your tier 1s. And that's really it for the gear and the mods. There are, of course, a couple of different mods that you could put on your gear, but I don't have them all collected, which is kind of a good thing, right? Because it basically shows you as a starter build. This is kind of what you can look to start a build with and easily get to the tier 10. I'm doing tier 10s, and I'm doing about silvers and bronzes right now, but I'm doing gold tier 9s. So not too bad for not having the best gear and just kind of having a basic starter set, getting all the way up to tier 10s with pretty much ease. It's also a super fun play style, just kind of walking up to mods, hitting them with a shotgun, and they just completely exploding in one shot. It's definitely a fun play style, as you guys could see in the gameplay showcase. But yeah, guys, that's all I got on this one. If you guys do end up trying this build, definitely let me know in the comment section. I'd be curious to see how it goes for you guys. I've been enjoying it quite a bit. I'm looking forward to kind of testing out some new builds, but this one gave me a ton of success getting up to that tier 10 mark. So I definitely wanted to share with you guys, and I hope you guys did enjoy it. You did learn some stuff from it, and if you did, hit that like button. Definitely subscribe to the channel. I will be doing some more Outriders content for sure. But yeah, that's all I got on this one, guys. I appreciate you sticking around, and I will catch you guys in the next one.